I missed my son's 6th birthday. Not by choice. I was halfway across the world, sleeping in sand under the dull breath of foreign wind, counting days by dog tags and dust. That morning, I wrote his name in the dirt with my boot and promised myself I'd make it up to him. Somehow. 4 months later, I walked through my front door for the first time in nearly a year. But it didn't feel like home. The house was clean in a way that felt cautious. As if it had been wiped of fingerprints. The scent was different too, not the warm cinnamon Claire used to love, but something sharper, unfamiliar. My eyes scanned the living room. The frames on the wall were rearranged. A pair of boots I didn't recognize rested near the coat rack, though I convinced myself they must have been old. Forgotten. My son ran into my arms the moment he saw me. His little body clung to mine like a life raft. He smelled like soap and apple juice and something that made my heart hurt. He had grown. Claire appeared a few seconds later. Composed. Perfect. Lipstick in place, hair smoothed back, not a trace of emotion on her face. She said I looked good. Said she didn't expect me home so soon. Her voice was polite. Practiced. Like we were neighbors, not partners. We ate dinner. My son told me stories about dinosaurs and soccer games and the birthday cake I never saw. Claire cleared the table, answered briefly when spoken to, and stayed on the edge of every room like a figure pressed into the background. Later that night, I tucked Noah into bed. He asked a question that stuck in my chest like shrapnel. Something about whether I'd be sleeping in the bed again. As if someone else had taken my place. Before I could respond, he turned and pulled a drawing from beneath his pillow, crumpled printer paper, covered in bold marker lines. I unfolded it slowly. It was a picture of our house. 3 stick figures stood in front, one with long brown hair, clearly Claire. One small one in a red shirt, him. And a third. Another man. Taller. Wearing sunglasses. A green shirt. Holding Claire's hand. I stared at it for a long time, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and recognition. My 6-year-old had drawn a stranger in my home. And he didn't hide it. I stayed in Noah's room long after he fell asleep. The drawing lay across my lap like a quiet confession, full of details too specific to be invented. The man with the green shirt had a square jaw, sunglasses, a smile. He wasn't standing behind Claire and Noah, he was beside them. Equal. Present. I stared at it until the colors blurred. There's a kind of clarity that only comes from silence. No noise, no yelling, no confrontation. Just pieces shifting into place. You don't need a smoking gun when a child hands you a crayon version of the truth. I folded the paper and slipped it into my duffel bag. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with black coffee and 100 thoughts I didn't say. Claire moved through the kitchen in her gym clothes, calm and collected, as if nothing had changed. I watched her pour almond milk into a glass, as if we were just 2 people living a normal day. But I wasn't in a normal day. I was in the ruins of something I thought was sacred. She didn't mention the drawing. Didn't ask what Noah might have told me. Either she didn't know, or she hoped I wouldn't connect the dots. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. Questions give people time to lie. Instead, I started watching. Her phone was never out of reach. Her texts were answered quickly, but never in my line of sight. She showered longer than usual. Her laundry smelled like cologne I didn't wear. 2 days later, I found a receipt in the trash. A boutique hotel. 2 nights. King suite. Paid in cash. The check-in date matched the weekend she said she was visiting her sister in Tucson. It wasn't proof. Not the kind you take to court. But it was enough for me. Still, I said nothing. Because I wasn't ready for the explosion. Not yet. Instead, I focused on Noah. On the way he lit up when I picked him up from school. On the sound of his laugh when I showed him how to throw a proper spiral in the yard. On how easily children forgive, even when they don't understand what needs forgiving. But one night, he said something that brought it all back. We were coloring together at the kitchen table. He picked a green crayon and said, "That's the shirt he always wore. The guy who brought the pizza." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. "Do you remember his name?" He shrugged. He called me Champ. But I don't think he liked dinosaurs. Then he went back to coloring, unaware of the hole he had just punched in my ribs. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage, holding the drawing like it was evidence from a crime scene. Because that's what it was. She didn't just cheat. She introduced another man into my son's world. Into my home. And whether she knew it or not, she'd drawn the first line in a war I never wanted. Some men confront. I observe. The military teaches you that not every battle is won with noise. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest blade. I started watching Claire the way I'd watch a perimeter. Casual. Measured. Intentional. She had patterns, always had. I knew them the way I knew the weight of my rifle. Monday mornings were yoga. Friday evenings, book club. Weekend errands that lasted too long with bags that came back suspiciously light. I didn't accuse. I didn't question. I simply noted. One Friday, while she was getting groceries, I checked our shared laptop. She rarely used it, but once upon a time, it was where she stored photos. Sure enough, the photo folder was still there. But what caught my attention wasn't in pictures. It was in the browser history. A Gmail login under a name I didn't recognize, t.martin.az. She'd logged out, but not before syncing data. A few keystrokes and I was staring at an auto-filled email draft. Saturday night was perfect. Your boy is starting to warm up to me. I felt something rupture inside me, not rage, not sadness. Something colder. The name clicked. Tyler Martin. I remembered him now. A guy from her old gym. Clean cut, loud laugh, the kind of man who wears tight shirts and says, "Bro," to waiters. I'd met him twice. He shook my hand too hard and looked me in the eye too long. Back then, I told myself not to be paranoid. Now I was telling myself I hadn't been paranoid enough. The next morning, I went to the park with Noah. We walked the path near the duck pond, just like I used to with my father before he left. Noah held my hand and asked me why grown-ups lie. I froze. Why do you ask? He looked down at the rocks near his feet. Because Mommy said that guy was just her friend. But he slept in your spot. I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I copied the email and forwarded it to a secure folder. I took screenshots. I began documenting. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for extraction. The next week, while Claire was out, I met with a lawyer. She was sharp, calm, and didn't blink when I told her I had reason to believe my wife had brought another man into our home during my deployment, and around our child. She nodded. Do you want to file? Not yet, I said. But I want to know my rights. She explained everything. Custody, property, parental alienation. Arizona is a no-fault state, she said. Infidelity won't get you everything, but if it affects the child. Judges take that seriously. I thanked her and left. When I got home, Noah was drawing again. This time, it was a picture of a house with 2 rooms. One had me in it. The other had Claire and the man in the green shirt. The walls between us were thick. No door. No way through. Even in crayon, my son knew something was broken. The house got quieter. Not the good kind of quiet, not peace. The other kind. The kind where everyone hears the creak of a floorboard and wonders who's holding the match. Claire sensed it. She started staying out longer. Coming home later. Always with a reason. Always with that look in her eyes, the one that says I know you know, but still dares you to say it out loud. I didn't. I had no interest in confrontation. What I wanted was clarity. And it came unexpectedly, in the form of an accident. Claire forgot to log out of her Gmail on the laptop. Not the t.martin.az account. Her main one. The inbox was mostly junk, promotions, receipts, newsletters, but I opened the sent folder out of instinct. Near the top, I found an email to her friend Amanda. He's home now. I thought it would kill the thing with Tyler, but I still think about him every time I'm with Cole. I can't fake it much longer. Dated 10 days after I returned. She hadn't just betrayed me overseas. She'd brought the betrayal back home, folded it into our routine like nothing was wrong. And now she was tired of pretending. Tired of the man who'd just come back from war and still couldn't sleep without one foot on the floor. I didn't confront her. I printed the email, added it to the growing file I kept hidden behind my old military records. I recorded the date. Time. I started tracking every night she didn't come home until after Noah was asleep. Every grocery run that lasted over 2 hours with no bags. Every new outfit that showed up in the laundry without tags. I also started spending more time with Noah. I took him to school. I picked him up. I sat through library day and helped him with math worksheets. I became a fixture, not a ghost. I wanted the court to see what he already knew, that I was the parent who stayed present. One afternoon, he asked if we could go to his favorite ice cream place. He looked nervous, like he was asking for something big. While we sat on a bench, him with mint chip and me with black coffee in a paper cup, he leaned into me and whispered. "Can I tell you a secret?" I nodded. He looked around like he might get in trouble. "I don't like when the man comes over. He talks loud. And he doesn't wait when I'm scared." I nodded again. My throat was too tight to speak. He licked his ice cream, satisfied he'd said what he needed to say. That night, I stood in the garage and stared at the photo I had taped inside my locker, the one from my first deployment, where I was 23 and thought loyalty meant safety. Back then, I believed home would always be sacred. Now, I knew better. Home is not a place. It's who guards it. And I was done letting someone else plant flags where mine belonged. 2 weeks later, Claire came home after midnight. No explanation. No excuse. Just the sound of her heels on the tile and a door shutting too gently. I was awake, sitting in the dark living room with a pen in my hand and a legal pad in front of me. Not writing anything, just holding the silence steady. She saw me. Paused. Then walked past without a word. I didn't follow. That was the moment I realized we were no longer pretending. Not even for Noah. The next morning, I made pancakes for my son. His favorite, with banana slices in the shape of stars. I asked him about school, helped him pack his backpack, kissed the top of his head. Then I sat him down and explained that sometimes grown-ups live better in separate houses. He blinked a few times, quietly chewing a bite of pancake. Then asked if he could still keep the nightlight I gave him. I said yes. Claire didn't show her face until noon. She walked into the kitchen like a woman passing through an Airbnb. I told her we needed to talk. She said she had a conference call in 20 minutes. I handed her a folder. Inside were copies of emails. Screenshots of text messages. The receipt from the hotel. Notes documenting her absences. The crayon drawing. At the back, a draft of a separation agreement and a formal request for joint custody, with me as primary residential parent. She flipped through the pages in silence. I watched her face. No tears. No anger. Just a long, deflating exhale like someone slowly realizing the party was over. "You've been planning this," she said. "No," I replied. "I've been living with it. Now I'm moving forward." She said nothing. Just left the folder on the counter and walked out of the room. That night, she didn't come home. The next few days passed like surgery, deliberate, clinical. She contacted a lawyer. I retained mine. Noah stayed with me while Claire arranged to move in with a friend. I didn't ask who. I already knew. What I didn't expect came on the fourth day. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Tyler standing there. No sunglasses this time. Just a strange smile and a posture that tried to look confident but sagged at the edges. He said he thought we should talk. I didn't respond. I stepped aside and pointed to the lawn. We stood there in silence. Then I handed him a copy of the same folder I gave Claire. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just said, "This is who you are." He flipped through a few pages. Paused at the drawing. His face changed. His hand lowered. He mumbled something about it being complicated. Said he didn't mean for things to happen like this. I turned to go back inside. He called after me, asking if I was going to make things public. Go to court. Tell Noah. I stopped in the doorway and looked at him over my shoulder. I already told my son everything he needed to know, I said. With my actions. Then I shut the door. And locked it. Claire moved out on a Saturday. No big truck. No ceremony. Just a few suitcases and quiet shuffling in the hallway while Noah played outside with sidewalk chalk. She didn't hug him goodbye. Didn't even look him in the eyes. Said she'd see him soon, like it was a line from a show she didn't want to finish watching. She left the house with her shoulders squared like she was proud of how little noise she made. I stood by the window, watching her taillights shrink into the horizon. I didn't wave. I didn't move. I just waited until the silence settled. Then I walked outside. Noah had drawn another picture. This one was simpler. Just two stick figures, holding hands under a sun that had raised like a starburst. The taller one had a beard. The smaller one wore red. A dog stood beside them, Max, our old Labrador, long since passed. There were no other figures in the picture. I taped it to the fridge that night. That week, my attorney filed the custody motion. Everything we submitted was clean, quiet, organized. The file we built, emails, dates, records of Noah's comments, absence logs, spoke louder than any courtroom outburst ever could. Claire's lawyer responded with hesitation. No countersuit. No accusations. Just a blandly written letter stating she did not contest primary residential custody but would request alternating weekends, once emotions settled. It was a white flag without the apology. I accepted the arrangement. Not because it was fair, but because Noah needed stability more than he needed justice. Over the next month, I built rhythm again. School drop-offs. Lunches packed. Nightly books with silly voices. He started sleeping through the night again. The nightlight stayed on less and less. Every trace of Claire that remained in the house either disappeared or became harmless background noise. A forgotten hair tie in a drawer. A wine glass pushed too far back in the cabinet. They didn't sting anymore. They were just things. Leftovers from a chapter already turned. One evening, Noah asked if he could make a Father's Day card early. He took out his markers and crayons and folded a piece of paper like he'd done 100 times before. When he finished, he handed it to me, carefully, like it was something delicate. On the front was a drawing of me with a cape. Inside, in blocky 6-year-old handwriting, it said, "You didn't go away. You stayed. That's why you're my hero." I didn't cry. I just pulled him into my lap and held him for a long time while the sun dipped behind the house. Because sometimes, survival doesn't look like a medal or a courtroom win. Sometimes, it's a crayon cape drawn by the only person whose opinion still matters. The divorce was finalized without a hearing. No dramatic court date. No witness stands. Just a signed agreement, 2 attorneys, and a dotted line that split the life we'd built straight down the middle. She didn't fight for the house. She didn't fight for full weekends. And she never once asked for the drawing, the one Noah had made of the 3 of them. Maybe she knew that picture was the last thing holding her in this story. I kept it in a folder. Not to remember the pain, but to remember what truth looks like when it comes from a child's hand. Life settled into a new rhythm. I started running again, not for fitness, but for release. The early morning runs helped clear the static. Helped me breathe again. I rebuilt the fence in the backyard. Repainted Noah's room. Donated the guest linens Claire had picked out. There was freedom in the mundane. Power in the small. Noah flourished. He started sleeping through thunderstorms again. He stopped asking where Claire was when she didn't call. On her designated weekends, he returned quieter, like a little soldier who'd seen things he couldn't explain, but within hours he was back to himself. Bouncing, laughing, trusting. One night, as I was putting him to bed, he looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. "Do you think the man with the green shirt is sad now?" I paused. Then said, "Maybe." He thought for a second, then rolled over. Good. And that was it. The next day, I took down the last wedding photo from the hallway. The frame sat empty on the counter for a while. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Then I remembered the drawing, not the one with Claire and the stranger, but the one Noah made after she left. The 2 of us, side by side, under a yellow sun with a dog from memory. I put that in the frame. Not as a replacement. But as a new cornerstone. Months passed. On a quiet Saturday morning, I opened the garage and pulled the cover off the old motorcycle I hadn't touched in 3 years. It still smelled like oil and memory. I spent the next 3 weekends restoring it, not for resale, not to escape, but because it had always been mine, long before her, long before everything. Noah sat on the workbench while I worked, his legs swinging, telling me stories about space dinosaurs and time machines made from cereal boxes. I smiled more that month than I had in a year. Claire still exists, somewhere. I imagine she still tells her version of things. That I was distant. That deployment changed me. That she needed comfort. But stories bend in the hands of those unwilling to face themselves. Mine never changed. Because truth doesn't need polish. It only needs peace. And I found mine. Not in revenge. Not in bitterness. But in the quiet power of being the one who stayed. Who protected. Who rebuilt. Some battles you win with fists. This one, I won with silence, and crayons.